In the next hour, a look at what can happen between taxiing down the runway and the instant the wheels come back down to earth. From mechanical failure to human error, how we cope with danger in the air. It's all part of the human experience.
I'm John Donvan for TLC. You hear of small private planes that fly too low and end up hitting trees or telephone poles. But a commercial airliner piloted by a veteran crew flying squarely into the side of a mountain? In late 1995, that's just what happened to an American Airlines flight in the Andes Mountains in South America. It's hard to believe, but not as unbelievable as the fact that some of the passengers actually survived the disaster.
In a stifling hospital room in the heart of Cali, Colombia, a 6-year-old girl from New Jersey slowly recovers from a horrifying ordeal. She was a little girl who loved to dance ballet, but today Michelle Dusan can't walk. Her legs were crushed in the crash of American Flight 965. Her father was also on the plane.
I was very excited before I saw her because I don't believe that she was alive.
Gonzalo Dusan has not yet been able to tell his little girl that both her mother and her 13-year-old brother were killed in the crash. It was the deadliest accident involving a U.S. airline since 1988. High in the Andes, 5 days before Christmas, 160 people perished. Even as victims were being laid to rest, relatives of those not yet found waited at a makeshift morgue for confirmation of their worst fears. And at the site of the crash, a surreal scene as family members searched for the bodies of their loved ones.
All I wanted to just find my family so I can bury them, that's it,
On the night of December 20th, American Flight 965 appeared to be on a perfectly normal course to Cali, Colombia. With the plane about 40 miles from the airport, flight attendants prepare for landing. The captain wishes everyone a Merry Christmas. 90 seconds later, Flight 965 disappears into the thick canopy of the Andes.
The plane was flying at more than 200 miles an hour when it hit the top of this mountain known as San Jose. So sudden and so devastating was the impact that most of the aircraft disintegrated. The only part that remained somewhat intact was this center section of the fuselage. It's no wonder that hardly anyone expected to find survivors here.
No one, that is, except the rescuers who climbed the 12,000-foot peak.
We talked about the survivors. There is survivors. There is survivors. Go, go, go. There is survivors.
No one knows how many people may have survived the crash, only to die on the mountain waiting for help. It was 8 hours before anyone reached the site. Dr. Laureano Quintero and John Fernando Bueno were the first volunteers to trek up this mountain. John Fernando discovers the first signs of the crash.
All over those trees in that area, there were suitcases, clothing, all kinds of things hanging in the trees.
As he travels up the mountain, he finds several bodies, but no survivors. Suddenly, he hears the faint moans of a child. It's Michelle Dusan.
I found the little girl right here, and I immediately went to look for something to immobilize her with. I see this box with a teddy bear.
A teddy bear?
Yeah, a teddy bear that records messages. So I record my voice saying, "Hi, what's your name?"
Hola, ¿cómo te llamas?
She suddenly opens her eyes and she smiles. It took my breath away.
Miraculously, there are other survivors, most of whom had been sitting in the middle section of the plane, around row 16. There's Michelle's father, Gonzalo.
When I get up from that place, I saw two bodies outside, two people, and they were talking. And I asked them for help to help my daughter to get up from that place. And they told me that they could, they can, because they can walk. Wow. They can get up.
Also pulled from the rubble, 21-year-old Mercedes Ramirez, who'd been traveling from Kansas with her parents. Both of them died in the crash. And then there was 19-year-old Mauricio Reyes, an honor student from the University of Michigan. His own brother, Juan Carlos, was part of the team that rescued him.
Hello, hello. He's alive. He's alive. Call the hospital. He has trauma.
These are the stripped-down remains of one of the most sophisticated commercial aircrafts ever manufactured, the Boeing 757. More than 600 are in operation, and never before had one crashed. So how was it that on a clear night with a veteran pilot at the controls, a state-of-the-art aircraft could fly undetected straight into the mountains? The black box recordings show that 30 minutes before landing, the crew is busy discussing flight attendant schedules. The plane is on autopilot, following a series of ground-based radio beacons that help cockpit computers guide the aircraft toward the runway. As it approaches the Cali airport, Flight 965 enters the precariously narrow corridor between two mountain ranges. The beacons guide the plane's computer, but the pilots also need guidance from air traffic controllers.
The controller thought this airplane was cleared to do one thing. The pilots thought they were cleared to do something entirely different.
Transcripts released by the Colombian government show the pilots think they're cleared to fly in a straight line toward the Cali airport. Controllers apparently think the pilots have agreed to fly a different course, one that'll take them over the beacon at a town called Tulua.
The pilot said, okay, so we understand we're cleared direct. The man on the ground is given the opportunity to say, no, that's not the clearance you were given, and yet he says affirmative. This is a lack of communication.
The controllers repeatedly tell the pilots to report when they get to Tulua, and the pilots finally concede. Not realizing they've already passed Tulua, they reprogram their computer.
And so when they punched Tulua in, the airplane said, yes, sir, you want to go there? We'll turn around and start going there. And it began a left turn.
The plane's computer does exactly what it's programmed to do. It directs the plane to the left, circling back toward Tulua. 90 seconds later, the pilots realize the mistake. They take control away from the computer and try to steer the plane back to its original flight path. Meanwhile, the aircraft is descending straight into the mountains. An alarm like this sounds.
Pull up.
The pilots try desperately to pull up, but it's too late. The tragedy might have been prevented if only the controllers had been tracking the plane on radar. The problem is, in Cali, there is no radar. It was blown up by leftist guerrillas 4 years ago. American Airlines has issued a statement saying human error on the part of our people may have contributed to the accident. But late at night in a hospital room in Cali, the issue of who's to blame is the furthest thing from the mind of 6-year-old Michelle Dusan. Before she drifts off to sleep, she poses a more haunting question to her father. Poppy, she asks, when we finally go home, will I have to get back on an airplane? Please don't tell me I have to get back on an airplane.
The National Transportation Safety Board says that between 1984 and 1992, 45% of all fatal commercial airline accidents were due at least in part to pilot error. Weather accounted for 23% of the problems, and mechanical failure, systems and instruments, 18%. But often, any number of factors are involved. In more than half the crashes, some other person not aboard the flight was partially to blame. If a pilot's crucial mistake helped bring about the Columbia crash, a different pilot's skill and heroism averted what could have been an even greater loss of life when the human experience continues. The 1992 flight out of Honolulu are relaxed, completely unsuspecting of what is about to happen. Then there's a sound, and they look up to see a huge hole in the side of their plane, where a split second earlier had sat 9 other people just like them.
I live more for the moment now, and I'm
today they appear so normal. An executive from Chicago,
I try to get the armrest out.
An LA businessman and his wife,
Lean on each other to sleep.
Well, somebody stated, and I think it's best to
a Denver lawyer,
you couldn't hear yourself scream.
No, you couldn't.
3 of us were flying the aircraft, and
a retired airline pilot.
And the noise was incredible.
The explosion was very quick.
Our eyes just locked. We just looked at each other.
Crack.
The wind, that's what I remember. And the feeling that
that there was no survival. You know? And to me, it was death. And
they have shared a common experience, an unforgettable moment which has bound them together emotionally. They escaped almost certain death when their aircraft blew apart over the Pacific. They were among the 345 passengers aboard United Flight 811, bound for New Zealand and Australia, when it took off from Honolulu on February 24. What followed was one of the most bizarre airplane accidents in history. 9 people died when a 10 by 20-foot section of the airplane disintegrated. We brought together the survivors who were the most closely involved in this mishap. This reunion in Los Angeles was the first time since the incident they've all been together. We gathered at Universal Studios in Los Angeles and boarded a mock airliner, a movie set, a 747 just like the one they were on, to help illustrate what they had gone through. Their story is one of love, heroism, and a fear which still haunts these passengers.
Climbing aboard this mock 747 and sitting here during this interview, what is it like getting back on this thing?
Well, I'm having a difficult time swallowing. I mean, I really, my throat is tightening, and it's strange. I mean, this is my first time back on this plane, and you just relive the whole thing. I mean, you live it over every night.
February 24th, 1:52 a.m., the departure. For most passengers, it was vacation time, a trip they'd been long planning and looking forward to. Flight 811 took off in the calm of the Hawaiian night. All seemed normal, as it does every night when 747s like this one lift off. Only Nina McGee had misgivings.
I was very nervous about going. I really did not want to go. And that night, I went to bed very late, about 12:30 or 1 a.m., after I had packed and a long day at work, and I actually cried that night. I thought, I don't want to go.
2:09 a.m., the explosion. The jumbo jet rose to 22,000 feet, reaching for a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. They were 100 miles out over the Pacific.
17 minutes into the flight, those aboard were settling in for food, for drinks, for sleep, when, in an instant, a blink of an eye, 9 passengers and 5 rows of seats were gone in an unforgettable rush of air.
Crack, just a huge crack, and then...
And it was...
And they were gone.
Linda and Bob Baina were seated in row 13 in the business class section on the right front of the plane. Floor and side of the plane in front of the Bainas was gone. For them, 13 turned out to be a very lucky number.
To me, it almost sounded like a tornado. It was a ripping sound like that. It all happened that quickly. It was within 1 or 2 seconds, and the next thing we looked up, and everything was just gone in front of us.
Jim and Nina McGee were seated directly across the aisle from the Bainas.
I heard metal cracking, and about the same time, the plane started to vibrate.
Rochelle and Bill Perrell were just in front of the McGees and across from the hole. Everyone to their right was gone.
The noise was deafening, and there was no hanging on, no holding on. They were just gone.
It was just a magic act. They just disappeared.
We all heard a hiss, and we each looked at each other, and I said, "What was that?" And immediately, this huge explosion.
And I was violently thrown forward and down, and I could see in my peripheral vision that the same thing had happened to all of the flight attendants that were in the area, and that everything that wasn't nailed down was just sailing forward through the air.
I was holding on so tightly, and I remember vividly digging my fingernails into the floor of the aircraft, just holding on, because I wasn't sure I was going to be blown out.
I saw mist rising in the cabin, and I immediately knew that there was a hole in the airplane somewhere and that we had suffered an explosive decompression.
In the cockpit, the crew heard a strange noise, and the huge aircraft shuddered.
We all turned to each other and said, "What was that?"
I knew we had an explosive decompression. I thought it was a bomb right away. I noticed that number 3 engine was inoperative, and we, of course, immediately started back to Honolulu.
Veteran United pilot David Cronin.
Mark asked me, should I start dumping fuel, and I said yes, start dumping fuel. Al, of course, was on the radio declaring a Mayday.
United 811 Heavy, we're at Mayday. We've got to come back. We had a bomb or something go off in the airplane. We're making a 180 and trying to get back to the airport.
Mark ran down the stairs to check what was going on down there.
He looked out, saw the hole, and we looked at each other, and when I looked at him, I said, "Dear God, please get us down."
And he came back, and his face was white as a sheet. And he said, "Captain, we have a serious problem. We've got a large hole in the right side of the aircraft. Passengers are missing, and we have injured passengers."
I was amazed at the size of the hole, and I looked out, and it was like looking through a picture window. You could see both engines, the whole right wing, and at that time, number 4 was on fire.
And I could see first the number 3 engine flame out, and then the number 4 engine on fire with flames that reached almost to the tail of the airplane.
We found out later that a suitcase had fired from the baggage compartment 60 feet out into number 4 engine, and it was chewing apart the engine. The problem was keeping the airplane in the air with this weight with only 2 engines. I, at this point, thought perhaps we might have to ditch because we were coming down at a high rate with full power, max power on. I asked Mark, how much power can we get out of number 1 and 2 engine, and what did you say, Mark?
Whatever it takes.
Our story continues as a jet carrying more than 300 people was now down to just 2 working engines. The passengers stared straight out an enormous hole through which 9 people had just vanished.
We really couldn't speak. Phil said to me, "The kids will be all right." You know, he yelled in my ear, "The kids will be all right." And, and I just kept sitting there and said, "I don't believe we're really going to die. We're really going to die."
And we kissed each other, and it was like a goodbye kiss. It was over. We just never felt we were going to make it.
Not knowing how much time we had, told her goodbye and said, "I love you, it's been great." And of course, she didn't want to hear that.
I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I was very worried about how can a child cope with being told that both parents have just died in a plane crash. And then I became angry. I was angry that I could not see her to adulthood.
You were the last row that didn't go out.
Correct.
Did you see in front of you people vanish?
No, it happened so quickly you couldn't see a thing.
How close did it come to you in your seat?
This window was gone. So right along in here was the frame that was left.
Nothing there?
Nothing there.
How close to your feet?
There was, about 6 inches by our foot there. So our first reaction was that we thought we were going to go out next.
You're sitting exactly on the precipice, looking out on a plane flying along at hundreds of miles an hour.
That's correct.
Nothing between you and the sky except your seat.
And our seat belts.
What did you say to one another, and did you think it was hopeless?
I reached over, whispered in Bob's ear, "I love you." I thought that was maybe the last time I'd ever say that. I grabbed his hand real tight. He didn't hear me. I asked him when we got down. He didn't hear me. So our communication was by touch.
It was one of the eeriest experiences of my life to go out into a cabin that had been so violently devastated, where you would expect screaming and a lot of agitated activity. People were sitting in their seats, they were holding one another's hands, and they were quietly crying.
2:26 a.m., the return. The badly disabled plane was attempting to get back and broke through the clouds at 4,000 feet with the lights of Honolulu in the distance.
We were still descending at about 50 feet a minute with full power on. I used a lot of my 21 years of flying gliders at this point in getting us back.
Because only one side of the aircraft was functioning, Cronin was forced to fly the plane asymmetrically, pilot's language for flying without proper balance. To stay on course, he used the power of his 2 remaining engines and compensated with the rudder and flaps.
At about 1,200 feet, I called for the landing gear, knowing that once that gear came down, we're committed to land, whether it be in the water or on the airport somewhere.
When I saw the lights of Honolulu, I yelled, "Hang on, there's some hope. I think we got a shot at it."
When we cleared the clouds and came in, then the fears of landing in the ocean dispelled. And then the fears started. What happens when we touch down? Do we explode? Does the aircraft fall apart? Do we fall out this big hole? There's nothing between us and that. On impact, what happens?
2:33 a.m., the landing.
Was there a point, and tell me if it was and what it was like, where you said, "We've made it"?
We've made it when we stopped on the runway.
Until then?
It was always a question.
The time I got downstairs, 99% of all the people are already out the slides and gone.
I would say we completely emptied that airplane inside 45 seconds. It was very fast.
We finally got down the chute and we hugged, and Bob said that there's something that we have to accomplish. There was no other reason that we were still here.
Mark and I evacuated out of one left, came around the nose of the aircraft, and I saw that hole there, and I just couldn't believe it. It was just an awesome sight to see.
We just all sort of stood there and looked at it. It was pretty amazing.
When the engineers on the ground studied what you were up against, what did they find in terms of the potential for landing this plane?
With the problems that we had and the weight that we had to contend with, the hole especially, they tried to run it through their computers, and they found that it was impossible to get the aircraft back.
Flight 811 aftermath, cause and effect. Denver attorney Bruce Lambert was also on the flight, heading for a vacation. He specializes in air crash lawsuits.
Just wanted to get away from the stress and the trauma of working on these accidents. They're great tragedies. And get away and lay on a beach in Australia somewhere. And I found myself literally and ironically traveling and flying into the next disaster.
The exact cause of the accident is still under investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board. But Bruce Lambert is convinced he knows exactly what happened and has filed lawsuits for a number of passengers.
Without a question, this accident was caused by a failure in the forward cargo door. It came open in flight, a situation that is not supposed to happen.
Was it predictable? Was it preventable?
Certainly. In this particular instance, this was not a case of a latent, hidden defect. There was documentation of the problem on this cargo door for 2 years prior to this accident.
This Boeing service bulletin, issued on April 8, 1987, alerted the Federal Aviation Administration and the airlines of a potential problem with the 747 cargo door. It warned that the cargo door opening in flight, quote, could result in rapid decompression, resulting in collapse of the passenger cabin floor and possible damage to airplane electrical and hydraulic systems. What's the legacy of Flight 811? For some, guilt. Survivor Jim McGee visited the mother of one of those killed.
And I felt very guilty that this 24-year-old guy flew out this plane. So I told her that, and she made me feel pretty good. She said, we're very happy for you that you survived. You know, don't feel bad. But the guilt is there. There's no question about it.
The legacy for most of the others? A new outlook on life.
We just do a lot more things together now and live for the day instead of taking a lot of things for granted. We don't get upset by the simple things in life anymore.
Those who survived unanimously cite the courage and experience of the cockpit crew for pulling them through, especially pilot David Cronin. He flew again for one last time. Reaching the age of 60 meant mandatory retirement. Al Slater flew co-pilot on Cronin's final flight, and there was a celebration to mark the end of his career as a commercial pilot. For David Cronin, his legacy of Flight 811 is a firm belief that in a moment of crisis, a higher authority stepped in. God, he says, lent a hand.
You know, I think he kind of showed me his power on 811, what he can do, and he brought us back. I'm convinced of that. I get up in the morning, I walk out on my deck, and I look down Lake Tahoe, and I say, thank you, Lord, for this great place you allow me to live, and thanks for this great day. And yes, definitely has changed my life.
The National Transportation Safety Board absolved United Airlines of blame, saying that the incident was probably caused by an electrical malfunction. The Safety Board also recommended that on 747s, the electrical power to all doors be turned off while in flight. Next, a pilot, unaware of any danger, takes his last flight when the human experience continues. Plane's pilot. If his experience tells him that conditions are good for takeoff, we assume he's right, even if it's stormy and icy outside. And if we look to the flight attendants for reassurance, we'll always get it. They are trained to have faith in their captain's judgment. But what if he doesn't have all the facts?
March 22nd, 1992. A U.S. Air Fokker F-28 jet like this one roars head-on into the eye of a snowstorm. pilots take on winter weather like this all the time. But on that icy Sunday, U.S. Air Captain Wallace Mazur lost the gamble and lost his life, along with 26 other people on his plane. Some are saying it was his fault, but was it? Let's go back to that snowy night at New York's LaGuardia Airport. U.S. Air 405 was still sitting at the gate. Captain Mazur's co-pilot was anxious to get an EDC time, an estimated departure clearance.
U.S. Air 405, we're running about an hour late tonight. What's the EDC time for us, sir?
You have no EDC time, U.S. Air 405. Just contact ground point 7 when you're ready.
Oh, great, thanks. I don't know how long that will last, though.
The flight plan is, should be good for 3 hours, sir.
Great.
The time was 9:05 p.m. Weather conditions required de-icing. U.S. Air 405 had already been washed down with de-icing chemicals, not once, but twice. Chemicals effective for between 10 and 15 minutes. The plane was now ready to taxi to the runway.
Ground, U.S. Air 405, ready to taxi.
U.S. Air 405, turn left on the inner and hold short of echo.
Turn hold short echo, U.S. Air 405.
But because of all the backed-up air traffic, U.S. Air 405 waited for almost 30 minutes while snow accumulated on its wings. That caused concern among some passengers.
I assumed that it was light snow and it was sitting there, and as soon as we moved, it would blow away.
So then the captain brought it around and said, you know, flight attendants, please take your seat. And I couldn't believe that they were really going to take off without de-icing again.
9:38 p.m.
U.S. Air 405, runway 13, cleared for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, U.S. Air 405.
You figure the crew's in the same plane, so obviously they wouldn't do anything that would endanger themselves, and I just blindly trusted that everything would be okay.
But things were not okay.
Crash. I'm on arrival. Somebody blew up.
On runway 13, down approximately next to November, there was a gigantic fireball. We assume it's right there.
27 people killed. The apparent cause of the disaster, ice on the wings. After the crash, everyone was quick to point out that the pilot is the final judge of takeoffs in icy weather. But should the buck stop at the cockpit? Or should responsibility fall right at the doorstep of the federal agency responsible for airline safety, the FAA, or the local airport authorities, or the carrier, U.S. Air? They all overlook vital information. Because, as it turns out, 3 years earlier, there was another crash of the same kind of plane under similar weather conditions in Canada. The Canadian government spent $10 million searching for answers to that accident, and they found them. Had American authorities taken a close examination of that crash, mistakes suspected of bringing down Flight 405 might have never been made. Let's go back to another snowy day, March 10th, 1989. The scene eerily familiar. Air Ontario Flight 1363 sat on the ground in Dryden, Ontario, Canada for nearly half an hour. Again, just as in the U.S. Air crash, it was the passengers themselves who became concerned as the plane moved to take off with snow on its wings. A survivor immediately after the crash.
This thrust, this thrust and this altitude that you gain on takeoffs just wasn't there. It was almost like you're up and then you're waiting. There was not this. And then the thing started wavered, a few knocks, I don't know what the heck was going on. And then people started to scream. And the next thing, we're in the woods.
Ice, long a natural enemy of flight. Experienced aviators know that wings contaminated with ice or snow are an invitation to disaster. Yet 2 planes, both Dutch-made Fokker F-28s, crashed, both attempting takeoff with ice on the wings, both flown by experienced pilots. The Canadian government, after an exhaustive investigation, came to this startling conclusion. A pilot sitting in the cockpit of the Fokker F-28 can think his wings are free of ice, when in reality, they can be dangerously contaminated. Ironically, it's only those sitting back here in the cabin who are more likely to spot ice on the wings of the F-28 up close, just outside the windows. Could you see the snow actually covering the wings?
Oh, yes. It was a fluffy layer of snow on the wings. You can actually see it.
Sonia Hartwig was the only surviving crew member of the Canadian crash in which 24 people were killed.
I had like this gut sick feeling that something was very wrong, yet I didn't do anything about it.
And I just kept staring at the wings, and as we were rolling, and our run, of course, down the runway, it seemed to have just melted and crystallized and turned into ice. Like it didn't blow off or anything like that. And then you can literally see like a sheen of ice on the wing. And I guess I finally realized, because when I was staring at the wings, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, we're going to crash.
Again, before takeoff, Sonia sensed the plane was doomed and sensed the captain had made a tragically wrong decision. Yet she still felt that under the system, she couldn't question the captain's judgment.
You don't question the commander's word. He's the captain of the ship.
That's how we were trained, that the captain was God, and the captain was the sole command on the plane, and we were to follow his instructions.
The fact that a flight attendant in the cabin of the plane saw ice while the pilot didn't was something some Air Ontario officials didn't want anyone to know. During the official government inquiry into the crash, a recording of a phone conversation was played for Flight Attendant Hartwick. Listen as she tells a company representative what she saw just before the crash.
Hi, Sonia, you okay?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine. I'm just here at the hospital. There's nothing wrong with me. I just got a few bruises.
Okay, where were you sitting?
I was sitting at E. And the wings were iced up.
They were after takeoff or before?
Before takeoff, there was quite a bit of wet snow on them. As we were taking off, it was freezing.
Okay.
And that's when I started to show my commands. As we went up, I knew it was taking quite a while, and I started to scream my commands.
Okay. Don't talk to anybody, Sonia. Okay. Don't tell anybody anything.
I know.
Is there anybody there from the company with you?
No one.
If anybody asks you anything or asks you to move, just say that you don't feel that you're capable of talking about it at the moment.
Senator Al D'Amato thinks that after the Canadian disaster, both U.S. Air and Fokker, the manufacturer, should have realized that another F-28 accident was waiting to happen.
This was a clear breach. And you can't tell me that the company wasn't made aware of that. Right. I mean, they obviously knew. They obviously chose to disregard it. So that's one of the failures.
A sad irony, considering all the answers were there before the crash ever happened. It's the pilot who still gets the blame because that's the system. But after all is said and done, it's the system itself and those in authority who have dropped the ball, have fallen asleep at the wheel. For Sonia Hartwick, who thought others might have learned from her tragedy, it's of little consolation.
How did you feel when you heard the details of the LaGuardia crash?
I was horrified, I was angry, I was mad, and it seems to me that no one's learned from this. People are still taking off in bad weather. People are still taking chances. Then because of it, 27 people lost their lives that day. And that to me is sickening.
Since the U.S. air crash in 1992, the FAA has set new guidelines for dealing with winter weather. For the first time, on certain types of airplanes, for example, someone is actually required to touch the wing to check for ice. Coming up, a short course in crash survival. What you need to know to get out alive when the human experience continues. Miracle, but it may not be pure chance. As you're about to see, experts say that there are actually steps you can take to increase your odds of survival. The first thing you should know is that most victims are not killed on impact. They die trying to escape.
It was just after dark. U.S. Air 1493 was one of many routine flights coming in for a landing at Los Angeles International Airport. The Boeing 737 was carrying 89 passengers and crew.
I remember looking out the window and remarking what a clear night it was and what a pleasant evening it was going to be.
David Koch, who at that time knew almost nothing about how to survive an air crash, was in the middle of a rather uneventful business trip that within an unpredictable few minutes turned into every passenger's nightmare.
There was this sort of sickening impact. It was almost like a crunch. And I looked up and there was a shower of sparks that was whizzing by the window. That was followed almost instantaneously by a ball of fire, and I could see flames shooting up past the window. And I said, my God, I think we've hit an airplane.
They had. The National Transportation Safety Board confirmed that the accident was caused when a ground controller had guided two planes onto the same runway, a commuter SkyWest and the 737. All 12 passengers and crew on the small plane were killed. 23 died on Koch's plane, but 66 survived, proving that passengers can walk away from accidents like this. Another spectacular lesson in survival took place when a United Airlines DC-10 came in for a landing at the Sioux City Airport in Iowa.
We have no hydraulic fluid, which means we have no elevator control, almost none, and very little aileron control. I have serious doubts about making the airport.
Many wondered then how anyone could survive such an explosive impact and fire. But 187 of the 298 passengers and crew did survive.
Over 80% of all airline accidents are survivable or partially survivable. What that means is that if you're involved in an airline accident, over 80% of the time you're going to have a chance to survive that, meaning that you won't be killed by the crash forces on the plane.
If passengers survive the impact, the most immediately threatening problem is fire and toxic smoke. On Koch's plane, most passengers died from breathing poisonous smoke caused by burning fuel and cabin materials. Koch, like most passengers, didn't realize he had less than 90 seconds to escape.
Smoke hit me really hard. I started choking violently. It was almost impossible to breathe. Very, very painful. I tried holding my breath to avoid taking in that bad smoke. At that point, I suddenly realized that I wasn't going to make it, that I was trapped inside the airplane.
You really felt doomed.
I felt that I was a goner.
Koch said a fire was raging around the front of the plane. The cabin was pitch black. Like most passengers, he didn't know where or how to get out.
I crawled for several rows down towards the rear. And while I was on my hands and knees, several people walked over me. I was sort of trampled.
By pure luck, Koch headed in the right direction.
I was almost unconscious by this time, but I put my fingers in the crack and pull, and it moved. I was able to get my head outside the door and breathe in a few breaths of fresh air. And that revived me considerably. I felt like Superman for a minute.
Even when passengers find an exit, it is often blocked.
It was a nightmarish sight. I remember looking at the overwing exit on the right side, and people were fighting desperately to pop out of that exit, and they were struggling, and one by one they were coming out, running across the wing and then dropping off.
Another thing passengers are not prepared for, the exit hatch weighs at least 45 pounds and is unwieldy even under the best conditions. Koch's plane had 6 emergency exits, but several had been damaged by fire, leaving fewer avenues for escape. The bodies of 19 victims were reported backed up in the aisle, apparently waiting in line to exit. But Koch got through the exit in time.
I estimated I was 10 to 12 feet in the air, and I hesitated about jumping because I had no shoes on, and but I said, what the hell, and just jumped.
Like Koch, many passengers on planes are business travelers. Some companies feel the airlines don't teach sufficient survival lessons, so they're sending employees to air crash survival schools. Ken Burton runs the Stark Survival Training Company and teaches executives survival in both commercial and corporate jets.
We teach them how to evacuate the aircraft as if they were the only ones to survive.
His advice, you must not stop to help anyone else when escaping a plane. Many safety advocates say the 90 seconds you may have is merely an arbitrary figure. Deadly smoke could kill you in less time, or you might have more, but you can't count on it.
You have to overcome the screams and the pain and the hollering and the carrying on inside the aircraft. You are responsible for you. You cannot be accountable for anybody else.
He trains his students in a handful of ground rules, and he says you can't break any of them.
I tell them, never sit more than 3 rows away from an exit. Sit on the aisle.
When you board the plane, count the seat backs to a first-choice emergency exit, and count the rows to a second-choice exit, because if the plane fills with smoke, you won't be able to see your way to the exits. You'll have to feel your way to escape. Burton also tells passengers never to crawl on their hands and knees, but to walk in a crouching position.
Trying to crawl out of an aircraft full of people on your hands and knees, the ensuing results would probably be stacked up like cordwood, or trample to death, or trip other people who are making their way toward the exit, therefore blocking their easy access.
Burton explained, other than being close to an exit, there is no single section of a plane safest to sit in because every plane and every accident is different. In fairness, the FAA is taking steps to improve passenger safety. In this test with a remote-controlled jet plane, the agency is working on safety fuels to limit explosions on impact like this. It's also mandated that seats be made of fire-blocking materials. But that safer material is not used throughout the cabin except in new planes or when a plane is completely refurbished. Safety advocates point out that most of us fly in older planes, ones that aren't outfitted with all of the newest fireproof materials. And the main safety device being tested by the FAA is a water fire sprinkler misting system that will dampen fires and cut toxic gases, like the ones that caused such a problem in the Los Angeles crash we saw earlier. Walter Coleman, an airline industry representative, feels planes are safe as is, and he defends the industry's record.
I think the traveling public assumes that they're going to get a safe trip, and they're paying for safety when they fly on a U.S. air carrier. And the evidence supports that, too.
Once again, here are the experts' main survival tips. 1, sit in an aisle seat, if possible no more than 3 rows from an emergency exit. 2, count the seat backs to the nearest emergency exit. You can then feel your way to the exit in case the cabin fills with smoke. Then count the seat backs to an alternate exit in case the first one is blocked. 3, do not crawl on the floor on your way out, but crouch waist high as far below the smoke line as you can get. Remember to rehearse the plan in your mind. You'll probably have fewer than 90 seconds to put it to use. Coming up, a man who not only survived that Sioux City crash, but became a hero in the process. When the human experience continues. I'm going to introduce you to a man who somehow has been able to salvage hope from tragedy and life from death. Jerry Schemmel was caught up in a deadly incident, one that he'll never forget.
Sometimes an event is so traumatic that it is forever etched in memory.
Jack down the lane, layup up and good.
It happened before Jerry Schemmel became the radio voice of the Denver Nuggets.
On the third quarter.
There's never been a day that's passed that I haven't thought about Flight 232.
July 19th, 1989, United Flight 232 cartwheeled into this fireball while attempting an emergency landing in Sioux City, Iowa. Jerry Schemmel was among the 296 people on board. How do you approach the possibility of your own death? There was a period of time when an emergency landing was inevitable and life hung in the balance. Each passenger had to take a most intimate inventory.
I had sort of looked back on my life and thought about a lot of things that I had done and not done. I had a wonderful marriage, a great wife who I'd never cheated on. I had a great family. I had parents that I loved very much, and I had told them so. I've got to think that I'm going to survive this. I'm going to see my wife again. And so I try to prepare myself mentally for whatever might happen.
On the ground, Jerry Schemmel helped to rescue as many other passengers as he could until the fire and smoke became overwhelming.
It was then that I heard a baby crying. I got down on all fours and just followed the cries.
Jerry went back into the plane and pulled out baby Sabrina, who was later reunited with her grateful parents. But Flight 232 took the lives of 112 others, including Jerry's best friend, Jay Ramsdell.
I saw Jay's fiancée after the crash several times, and I always thought she was looking at me thinking, why are you here? Why did you survive this? And my fiancée is dead, and I'm hurting so bad. It's the guilt that you get from it. The other thing is just a sort of listlessness. I had quit my job. I wasn't working. I had no motivation. I sat back and I thought, what in the world am I doing, and what am I going to do with my life? And I just turned to God and I said, you've got to come into my life and please help me. And all I can say is that he did.
Jerry Schemmel has since become a father, which on the plane he feared he might never do.
All set, Kenny?
And he has put his professional life back together, starting with the Denver Nuggets. More importantly, he has found a new sense of spirituality and purpose.
Despite all the suffering, I think I'm probably a better person than I was 4.5 years ago.
It's amazing how Jerry and so many other survivors view what they've gone through not as a soul-killing experience, but as another opportunity in life. If you think about it, we all seem to have adopted that attitude. Despite the chance that something terrible might go wrong, we keep on flying. I'm John Donvan for TLC. Join me again next time on The Human Experience.